AM 560. The Answer.
Is for controversial Fort Mill manufacturing facility Silfab Solar is facing lawsuits alleging it did not pay what it owes its contractors. The case comes nearly 3 months after a pair of chemical leaks that caused a temporary shutdown at the solar panel plant and led to new
billions and billions and billions of dollars stolen, frauded in the name of green energy, solar and wind. EJ Antoni, are you all right?
Sean, I am dodging the gunfire as we speak. No.
Very good, very good, very good. But you're driving through Texas, which is ironically one of, if not the greenest state in the entire country. And the reason is so many of those oil companies were in on this fraudulent scam. So we are seeing a readjust of the way in which energy companies are starting to realize they have to actually produce energy versus just produce the scam of wind and solar, which Texas did very well. And these other states are being made aware of it because the money's dried up. This is all good news, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And ERCOT, which is the essentially the distribution, the electrical distribution grid down here in Texas, they have a couple small sections of other states, but it's primarily just Texas. The very, very painful lesson that they have had to learn multiple times now has been the fact that when you have severe weather, like when on the rare occasions it actually gets cold in Texas during the winter, things like solar and wind simply do not produce. They do not keep up. And a lot of the state has actually literally run out of energy. The electricity has gone off because they can't produce enough energy. They have become so reliant on unreliable sources, again, like solar and wind, because they got tons of energy credits for it and they got tons of subsidies from the Biden administration. But the fact is these things don't work. And the really crazy thing was one time when we had a particularly bad winter storm down here, what actually happened was the power went out to the natural gas facilities that were providing gas in the major pipelines throughout the state. So not only did a lot of homes lose electricity, but they also lost pressure on their natural gas lines. So those poor folks couldn't even use a backup generator in order to keep their furnace running, and people literally were sitting in homes that were below freezing. I mean, it was such a total disaster. But look, this is all the result of getting suckered in to again, these crazy solar and wind schemes. That's what they are. They're schemes by these government subsidies. Government subsidies are just like taxes. They provide heavy distortions to the market, which would otherwise provide for an efficient allocation of resources.
T. Boone Pickens was explaining this as he lost $1.5 billion in the wind business because he was one of the rare independent oil men who made a fortune and then thought he was going to be the new wind baron. And he really revealed just how fraudulent and how ineffective and how costly it really is. But California operates in a different world. And what I'm going to ask you is I don't know the answer to. We now know that California has their own regulations, but they're really laws that nullify American foreign policy law. California is the only state in the country that insists on importing oil directly from Iran. And when you look at the insanity of that oil-producing state, which people forget, it was one of the top 3 oil-producing states. This is self-induced failure, self-induced costs, self-induced penalties on people who are honest and trying to pay for energy. Can the federal government rescue California? Do the states have enough latitude to create foreign agreements with nations that have been declared by our federal government as enemies of the state? I'm very confused on how California could demand it imports oil from a 48-year enemy of America, specifically naming Iran as one of its oil importers.
Well, Sean, I think this is definitely kind of the modern-day nullification crisis, almost like something similar to what happened under Andrew Jackson all those years ago, where I think this administration is going to need to take states like California to court because these states are not allowed to nullify, as they say in the law. They're not allowed to nullify the laws and the dictates of the federal government. Now, look, I am all for federalism, right? I want the states to be laboratories of democracy, and I want the federal government to be small, to be limited, and to be constrained so as not to trample on the rights of states and of citizens. But when the federal government does exercise legitimate authority that has been delegated to it by the states cannot then turn around and nullify it. But that's exactly what California has been doing through all of their crazy energy policies. And that includes things like emission regulations, and it also includes things like oil imports.
The reason I ask you this is not just because of oil imports to California, but Illinois now has this new idea that they are going to sequester their citizens from the benefits of social media companies through the threat of taxing them. So Illinois has decided we are going to tax social media companies on behalf of the users who get the use of these social media companies for free. So now they're going to make them pay a tax. Can the federal government save Illinoisans from the bankrupt, failed, fraud state economy of Illinois? Can a state tax its citizen? And I think these companies should simply refuse service the way they do Iran, right? I mean, you can't use it in some of these totalitarian countries. They just shut it off. What do you think the play is for states that are operating under fraud, that sequester the federal government from looking at them, as Illinois passes or California passes laws where you can't have investigative journalists, they can't put video that they film on air. They passed that law last week, and Illinois is soon to follow. Do you think the federal government will prevent these corrupt, bankrupt states from taxing their citizens to use services that are free from the provider?
They certainly should, and for two reasons. One, in certain instances, this actually it's likely that there are violations here in terms of interstate commerce, Sean, which the states are not supposed to be controlling. That is under the purview of Congress, so it should really be, again, Congress making the rules. But the other issue here is that you can, as the federal government, tie federal dollars to a lot of different types of behavior. There's a reason why all of the states have the same drinking age, for example, and it all has to do with federal highway funds. In other words, if a state were to turn around and say, we're lowering our drinking age to 16, you better believe the federal government is going to shut off highway funds. In fact, that's already in statute, and it's why nobody does it.
Well, it's fascinating to think that the federal government had the power to save all these citizens who live under these Democrat fiefdoms from the abuse that they've faced, whether it's taxing gas 5 times from the time it's refined to it hits your tank and all the other things that the Democrats have perpetrated. And then you could really end that sanctuary nonsense. And the reason these states have sanctuary laws isn't because they're magnanimous. It's because they want to use more head counts to steal more money from the federal government. I think that the only reason we know this and we're talking like this is because of Donald Trump. Had Jeb Bush won the way they wanted, nobody would care and the problems would be 3 times as bad. Do you feel that way?
Oh, my gosh, Sean, can you imagine whether it was Jeb Bush or a Mitt Romney or a Mike Pence or a Nikki Haley? Can you imagine having any of these conversations? Absolutely not. Instead, we'd be in all kinds of conflicts around the world. We'd probably be in a kinetic war with Russia at this point. I mean, it would be an absolute disaster. For all his faults, Donald Trump is head and shoulders above any of the alternatives that we've had in terms of Republican presidents over the last several years.
Please clap.
Now, one of the things I want you to be aware of, because I know what a data bug you are. I am in the middle of an incredible expose on this scumbag, Jeb Bush. Did you know? You remember? I was always off put by old man Bush and his love of Bill Clinton. And when you look at the Bush brothers, most people don't know there's 4 of them. And when you look at the scandals that are Marvin, that are Neil, and you look at Jeb, did you know that he worked with the Clinton Foundation with the money that was absconded in Haiti that nobody talks about? And it was right here in Miami where he partnered with another scandalous pig who had these panels that they were going to put up temporary housing. And you're talking, EJ, billions of dollars. Jeb Bush he was on the board of the company, sat on the company. They steal the money for Haiti. Jeb Bush gets the contract with it, and none of the stuff gets built. And that guy who owned that company that put Jeb Bush on the board, he went to prison for tax evasion, and Jeb Bush ran for president. When you look at this, there's a reason you should never, ever, ever vote for an establishment Republican again. And I think Donald Trump has changed the mores of citizens of America. I don't think they're ever going to tolerate a Mike Pence, a Bush. I really think this is the beginning of a fantastic renaissance in American economy, of private economy. I feel that way, and I know Heritage is on the forefront of it. Look into that Bush rat bastard and the Clintons. They were tied together like a braid of corruption.
Sean, I promise I will. You bet. I will tell you what, real quick. I know you got to go, but one of the things that will turn you into a cynic very quickly is reading about all of the intelligence agency connections between both the Clintons and the Bush families. It's insane how deep that rabbit hole goes and how tightly connected those supposed political adversaries were.
Yeah. How about Marvin Bush was the head of he was involved, the CEO of the security company that had the security on the World Trade Centers during 9/11. You know how many people know that? Me and you and the listeners. And that's it. It's amazing, the corruption. That old man Bush, I'd like to dig him up and throw him in an alley. Thank you very much for always making time for me.